Today's fairy tale is called The Girl Without Hands, and it's different than the Brothers Grimm Girl Without Hands, even though it has some similarities, but in this one, Jesus shows up, and spanking saves the day. It's from a book called West Virginia Folk Tales from Europe, but it's purportedly a story from Persia, and the cover of the book has our story. See? No hands. This story begins like a lot of handless girl fairy tales where a king tries to marry his daughter. It's another one of those. King's wife dies, and sometimes in these stories she says, you can't marry anyone who isn't more beautiful than me, or my ring has to fit on their finger. And this one she says, you have to marry someone who looks exactly like me. And guess what? It ends up being his daughter. When he tells his daughter, rather than marry her own father, she requests to be killed. So he tells executioners to take her out and bring back her tongue, one eye, and her hands as proof of her death. Which is kind of silly because you could lose all of those parts and still live, but They decide to kill her by chopping her head off, but there's some kind of magic surrounding her. They just cannot get the head off. And so they decide they're gonna kill a large dog and take all the body parts, the eye and the tongue and stuff from the dog, but they still need human hands. And even though they can't cut off her head, they are able to cut her hands off. So then they go back and she goes off bleeding into the woods. Eventually she reaches another country, and there's this king who has an orchard full of golden pears. And as happens in the Grimm brother version, she starts eating the pears, like somehow getting them like with her mouth or something. She does it at night when no one's looking, so the king hires people to stay up and figure out who is eating the pears. All the guards he sends out fall asleep, and he puts them to death for doing so. And so finally he sends his own son, the princes, out. The first and second fall asleep. He doesn't kill them though, because they're his kids. But the third one figures out he will stay awake by putting on a crown of thorns so that he can't get comfortable and it'll poke him and he'll bleed and he won't be able to sleep. So it works. The thorn crown keeps him awake, and he eventually sees the girl coming out and getting the pears. So he covers her with his overcoat, goes home to his dad with her like all hidden, and says, Dad, can I keep what I found that was stealing the pears? And the dad's like, sure. And then he reveals her and he's like, it's this girl, I want to marry her. So they get married and all is good, but then her father finds out she's still alive. He has the executioners who lied to him put to death, and he makes war on her father-in-law's country. So her husband now has to go off and fight in this war against her dad. Our girl's husband has this evil stepmother who hates the girl, and so she fakes a letter from the prince who's out at war to the king, his dad, saying, hey, burn that girl alive. No reason, just because I want to. The king just likes her and doesn't want to do it, so he makes a dummy and has the dummy burned alive and tells the girl, you're gonna have to go run off into the forest, and so she does. While she's out in the woods this time, she sees a wild hog that only has 3 legs, and the narrator tells us it's because it got wounded. A hunter shot it off. It wasn't born that way. She watches the hog go into a river and then come out with 4 legs, so it's clear that it heals. And so she goes into the river, and guess what? She comes out with hands again. She's also pregnant at this time, so she keeps traveling, and finally she's like, I need to rest. And she finds this cottage and farm that no one is living in or working. So she stays there for a while out of exhaustion, and then she's like, well, no one's coming back, so she starts taking care of the stock and keeping up the house. She gives birth to the son, and they live there for 3 years without ever seeing another person until suddenly a younger man and an older man show up. And it's Jesus and St. Peter. We're told that right away. And they tell her right away too, and they're like, how are you doing? And she's like, good, except my son isn't baptized. But Jesus himself baptizes her son and names him Peter for Peter. So Peter's kind of his godfather now. And as Jesus and Peter are leaving, Jesus tells the mom, hey, when your son is 12, tell him to ask God for any favor and he'll get it. Finally, the prince comes home from war that we're assuming that they won. He's like, where's my wife? And the king's like, you told me to burn her. And he's like, I did not. You burned her? And he's like, no, it's actually cool. I didn't burn her, but she ran off into the woods. So the prince takes a bunch of men and goes out to find her. But on the way, all of them die except the prince and the valet, just from hardships. The prince and valet end up at our woman's cottage. She lets them stay the night. She recognizes her husband, but doesn't say anything. The prince and the valet take turns sleeping. And while the valet is awake, she sees the boy acting up and the girl spanking him. So then when they wake up and the valet and the prince are alone, the valet's like, hey, I think that chick's your wife. And he's like, how can she be? My wife does not have hands. And then the valet says, no, this chick is your wife, but she does have hands. I saw her spank her son with them. I don't know if they couldn't see them at any other time. Next night, they're all eating together. And so the son, out of nowhere, asks his mother, Mother, what's with the red stripes on your hands? Which we're now told she has, apparently on her wrists. And she goes, well, that's where my hands were cut off. God gave me these new hands. So then the prince is like, oh my God, you are my wife. And she's like, yes, I am. Apparently she just wanted him to come to the conclusion himself. Then he's like, oh, we should all go home to the palace together, but this way here was so treacherous, all of my men died except us two. How are we ever gonna get home? And she says, don't worry, our son can ask God for any favor, so he can just do that now. So the boy wishes that they could all just be transported home with the farm and all the stables and all of their livestock, and they are. They just go back. Keeping the wife hidden, the son goes to the dad and tells him everything that happened and how it's all the stepmom's fault, really. And so the dad says, what should I do to the stepmom? And the prince says, that's your job to decide. So the king goes to the stepmom and says, what do you think should happen to someone who causes an innocent person to be burned alive? Because she still thinks that she got burned alive because it was the dummy. She says that person should be hitched to 4 horses and torn to pieces. So that's what they did to her. The end. As always, check out my book, Dust Spells, and my podcast. All the links are in the bio.